From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you. Here's what's coming up. K-State's Dan O'Brien remarks on another impressive week for the grain markets, and he suggests that things may be lining up for a counter-seasonal post-harvest rally in the wheat market. Also today, K-State's Joel DeRouchey talks about a major development for K-State's renowned swine research program, the brand new Sow Farrowing House. He'll tell how this state-of-the-art facility will advance sow nutrition and farrowing management research. Later, K-State's Rich Llewlyn will preview a K-State webinar series starting next week and covering Kansas farmland values, property valuation, and farm income trends in the state. And K-State's Mary Knapp on Kansas agricultural weather. Here on Agriculture Today.
A social distancing tip.
Putting distance between yourself and others is critical to slowing the spread of coronavirus. So here are ways to stay in contact without the physical contact part. Call, send a text, set up a video conference, post on social media, dedicate a song on the radio. If you have symptoms of fever, dry cough, and shortness of breath, call your healthcare provider before going to their office. For more info, visit coronavirus.gov.
Let's all do our part, because we're all #alone together. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
This is Agriculture Today. Thanks for being along with us on this Friday, and now we're in touch with grain market economist Dan O'Brien of K-State Research and Extension, his weekly stint on the grain trades. And Dan, we're running out of superlatives for these markets. We saw another surge on the futures yesterday, following basically a week of bullishness, and corn seems to be leading the way.
Yes, I'd like to have a comment on something to not be fooled by in the markets. Okay. And that would be that the action in the upfront May contracts are coming into the final death throes of the delivery periods. So when you look at yesterday's closes on May corn, closed at the May contract 759.5 and the July at 718 3/4. So again, July is still tremendous, 718 3/4. But that top end price has a lot to do with positioning to deal with the delivery realities. And more so even with soybeans. The soybean May contract closed at 1605.5, July 1569. But the over 16 number had to do with, again, these jockeying for positions, trying to avoid the worst possible outcome that people have between longs and shorts as they finish up the May contract. Now, one place where that's not showing up is in the hard red winter wheat contract. The May contract is 717 3/4 up front, but then July hard red winter wheat, again, Kansas hard red winter wheat traded on CME, 726 3/4. So you got a little bit of carry in that market. So it's interesting that wheat isn't scrambling quite so much as corn. And also, by the way, you look at the supply-demand balance sheet, we're not near as tight in terms of supplies for wheat as we are for corn, and rumored to be even tighter perhaps than the USDA numbers are even showing, and absolutely for soybeans projected to be just as tight as can be. So you've got that. Another thing that's happened, and particularly you see it in corn, is that in the last few days, the dry conditions, particularly in the northern states, and you can just put a bullseye on North Dakota, dipping down to South Dakota, over into eastern Montana, and dry conditions, a number of those states up in there coming out of that. You show the drought monitor map with, again, the dry conditions again in the Dakotas, but what's really forming, and I think as big a deal, if not bigger, is that the reformation of the dry conditions in the northern half of Iowa. And we've been struggling with that thing for, I think it's been 2 years now. And now if you watch that map, particularly the northwest corner, but really the northern half of the state, dry, classified as severe drought. So great planting weather, but raises cautions and concerns. Because of that, the back end months are moving higher. December corn, yesterday's close, 625.5. We were sitting at, we were having forward contract prices, happy to see them at 550, 558, something like that, about a week or two ago. And now the forward contract prices across Kansas, based on the December contract, forward contract for new crop harvest, you've got Colby 621, Salina 606, 597, Topeka 655, about $1 higher in Garden City, Hutchinson 625, Columbus 6. So now we have been talking about the problems that have been brought about by this drought in major production areas in South America. Well, that's affecting the upfront contracts. But now our dry conditions in our country are affecting the perspective of the trade and adding worry and urgency into pricing of new crop contracts. And so on the one hand, I see what's happening in front contracts. Yeah, we're closing a contract out, tight situation. Yeah, understand completely. But the news to me is that the new crop contracts, particularly for corn and, also for soybeans, November soybeans closed at 14.09 yesterday, over 14. Mm-hmm. So when you have D's corn at 625 and November beans at 14.09, you're starting to transfer concern over not just from South America, but into the United States for what we're going to end up with by the time we get out into the harvest of this year.
Now, the wheat market, Dan, is riding the coattails of corn to a certain extent, and you say that you can make the case for a post-harvest rally in the wheat trade.
This would probably be the one of the last stands of a K-State ag economist talking about grain. You make a statement like this.
Going out on that limb. All right.
No, there you go. I'll go out on that limb. I think that with the tightness we're seeing in existing current year market year supplies for feed grains and spurred on by concerns about soybeans as well, that, again, the first crop that'll be a new source of supply coming into the United States will be the hard red winter wheat crop coming out of the central and southern plains, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas. And there's, on the fringe, you've got eastern Colorado, you've got New Mexico, places like that also coming in, parts of Nebraska. So my thought is, I'd at least like to put it on the table is that when that crop gets harvested, are we going to put that in storage to export it somewhere? And we're okay export-wise, but we're not doing gangbusters. Or will that crop be anxiously gobbled up by anybody that can get hold of a grain to keep feeding livestock, even to keep ethanol plants going, you name it, not just here, but abroad? So I guess my hypothesis, we'll see if it turns out, is that I realize that we've got some unbelievably profitable numbers that can be projected for fall harvest, given the forward contract prices we've just been talking about. But I do think that it's worth considering what will happen when a hungry agricultural set of industries come in and we actually have new crop on the table. And I just really wonder about a strong price rally going on in hard red winter wheat. And it won't be because, if it'll happen, there'll be export pull, but it'll be because it's very likely to be because of domestic users just trying to gobble that thing up. So normally we harvest that grain, we take it to the elevator. This year, we're going to be taking it to feedlots, and we'll still be going to the elevators, no doubt, largely, but how long is it going to stay there? You just have an urgency, and I guess what you call a really very inelastic demand to get hold of a grain like that can accomplish a lot in livestock feeding and bioenergy industry. If the other shoe drops on this scenario that we're developing on such tight supplies, the market's going to have to come after wheat. That's my thought.
Dan, the USDA comes out with its latest World Agricultural Supply and Demand estimates this coming Tuesday. As you anticipate that, do you foresee anything there that would in any way cool these markets off?
Well, I do think that the pace of exports for U.S. wheat overall, and particularly hard red winter wheat, has been lagging the USDA's projections. And you can just see it in the weekly numbers. So we just got done talking about these issues of domestic demand for wheat on the one hand and also lagging exports for wheat on the other, particularly for hard red. So the numbers that'll matter if what we've been talking about work out in play will be feed and residual and industrial usage of wheat if this comes about. So it does look like to me that the USDA, since they tend to not make major adjustments till they have hard numbers from quarterly stocks reports, and that's not going to come till the end of June, that the USDA probably in this coming report very likely will probably scale back this current marketing year's export number. And that could show higher ending stocks for wheat. But again, the other shoe to drop will be, we may not have evidence of that until we actually get out into the end of June and have that next stock report. I would say that the prices for all these grains are just tremendous, and that's both cash price and forward contract price. We've been making an effort in our weekly reports to try to at least aggregate that in one spot where people can see them. So there's not a market that isn't affected either directly or indirectly by the weather concerns first from South America, and now, I guess, shaken confidence, really, in terms of what our summer prospects are. And a lot of that coming from, yes, we're paying attention to the Dakotas. One I'm watching is in Iowa. And if that drought comes in, then you're talking number one corn-producing state in the United States, and that'd be a big impact on the market.
Quick parting thought, you'll be a participant in a K-State webinar this coming week. Fill us in.
Yes. With all that's happening in the markets, we thought it would be good to have a webinar coming through our www.agmanager.info website, or basically what we put out at K-State Ag Econ. Myself, Guy Allen with IGP, and Mark Wood from the Kansas Farm Management Association are going to be talking about different things. I'm going to focus on the domestic side for sure. Guy Allen, with his IGP background, to speak about international market trends, particularly China, South America, and everywhere else. And then we have Mark Wood coming in, our colleague from the Farm Management Association, to speak about cost of production. These are amazing prices. Look at 30, 35% rate of return over full economic costs. So I don't know that we can guess the high in the market very well, but man, right now we've got opportunities to tie in some very good rates of return.
Great information that'll be exchanged on that webinar. It's this Monday, and you can find out more at agmanager.info. The registration details right there at hand. Dan, always a pleasure. We'll talk again next week. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. Take care.
On the grain markets, grain market economist Dan O'Brien, K-State Research and Extension. We'll be back shortly on Agriculture Today.
When a thunderstorm approaches, follow these safety tips. Lightning, known as the underrated killer, usually strikes the tallest objects, so avoid standing beneath trees or other isolated tall objects. Take shelter in a sturdy building. Remember, if you're close enough to hear thunder, you're close enough to be struck by lightning. Help keep you and your family safe this severe weather season. For the National Weather Service, I'm Bill Curtis.
We're back now on Agriculture Today, and it's always a pleasure to share good news about agricultural research facility upgrades here at Kansas State University, and in this case, in support of the pork industry. K-State is just about to unveil a brand new farrowing house research facility. We get the word on it now from Research and Extension livestock specialist Joel DeRouchey of K-State. There's a natural excitement to new bricks and mortar, but for you and your swine research team here at K-State, Joel, this is a big milestone.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Eric, and it's always good to talk about improvements and progression in different programs and in our swine program. We're really excited to have a new teaching and research facility at our K-State Swine Teaching and Research Center just north of campus as part of our cluster of animal livestock facilities. And yeah, this has been in the process for many years. And in fact, at our swine farm over time, it seems like about every 7 to 10 years we're building a new building, and we rely on our industry and our swine producers and many for the donations of financial resources to get these buildings built. And this one is very similar in that. And we're excited to replace a facility that was initially built in the late 1960s that we're still using today, still functional, but obviously now we have something that's using modern equipment, modern technology to train our students as well as to do research with industry partners.
Well, what are some of the features of the new farrowing house then that you would consider an upgrade from the previous facility?
Yeah, I think it's really the basic design. You know, the old farrowing house, not that it wasn't It was still commercially relevant, but today what we have is a little bit larger farrowing space. So over time, sows have gotten larger, and so we just have a space for that sow and litter that are larger in terms of square footage for her to lay down, and then especially her piglets. When that facility was built in the 1960s, late 60s, it was pretty typical a sow would wean, 7 to 8 pigs. Today we're weaning pigs. Each sow is weaning pigs over 12 to 14. Most sows are going to have 16 to 17 pigs born live. And so, again, we just need more space as they occupy that. We also have, again, some of that additional room for some environmental work. We can do heat pads, heat lamps, hovers, different technologies like that for animal comfort, piglet survivability. And also the big part of that, too, is we really have equipment that's relevant to going into commercial facilities today that trains the students to know what that equipment looks like, how it operates, and that's from the farrowing crates to just the general layout and the feeding system as well.
So what's the capacity of the facility?
Yeah, so it'll have 32 crates, and so we can farrow up to 32 sows at one time. And the way our farm is set up is we batch farrow. So every 35 days, we will farrow approximately 30 sows. And so, again, that helps us with the flow, and that 30 sows that farrows will offer us about 350 to 400 pigs, depending on the wean group. And then we utilize those pigs then next in a nursery where we do teaching and research activities. Then those pigs, after about 6 to 7 weeks, move to our finishing facility, again, where we can do research as well as teaching activities with our undergrad and graduate students until they reach market weight and go to harvest. So it really allows us the best way to get those pigs off to the best start and a healthy start possible.
Any cutting-edge technology, the proverbial whistles and bells that really stand out here, Joel?
Yeah, one of the things we're able to put in is the feeding system. So again, it's very typical in our sow facilities that the sows get full access to feed, and that's really through a feed line and then a tube or some sort of device that comes into her feeder so she can have full access to a full buffet of feed all day long. We're going to have a similar type design, but a company called Gestal, they have feeding technology equipment where you can blend diets. It's all going to be based on a computer system, a computer feeder, essentially in front of each sow that will be able to specifically measure feed intake more accurately, as well as blend different diets to show different types of diet effects on the sow. And so that's really something that's been developed over the last few years. I'm very fortunate that company was able to donate that type of feeding system. And so we'll have that partnership to train students, and they can be exposed to this type of technology that we see is going to be more prevalent going forward.
That leads then to the question of what the new farrowing house will allow in terms of research that couldn't have been achieved before or even conducted before in the previous facility, Joel.
Yeah, it'll allow us, as we just talked about, some more precise feeding.
Right.
Also, really, because of how our crate configuration or where the areas where the sow is as well as her litter, we have additional space to do, again, some more thermal neutrals. Those young piglets, when they're born, only weigh about, between 2.5 and 3.5 pounds. So they're real young. And so we basically want to look at ways to provide supplemental heat, supplemental care is needed. And so that'll allow us to have a little bit more space to be able to do that in a more modern area where that sow farrows with her litter. We'll also be able to do different types of feeding regimens, feeding practices to maximize her intake, because the more feed a sow eats, the more milk she'll produce. And again, especially on sows that have these larger litters, their milk demands are very high. And so again, we want to be able to maximize that to keep her body in the best shape possible while she's in lactation, but also then it can benefit the piglets. And so it just gives us some more flexibility around different feeding types as well as different ingredients that we could include with those diets as well.
You and your team are obviously thrilled by what the new farrowing house will allow in all these research pursuits. When will it be ready to roll?
Yeah, so we're here in the first part of May. We're actually completing the construction, and in June is the first time that we'll have sows enter that facility and to start to farrow and have their litters of pigs. So we're just within a month of being able to move sows into that new facility, and we're really excited to be able to make that transition.
Once more, it is located at the Swine Research Unit toward the far north end of the Kansas State University campus. And likely those in the industry and those with an interest in it will be hearing more about this in the near future, Joel.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we'll be this is really kind of a launch. Certainly this has been going on in the planning. Again, we have a number of industry partners that have donated financial resources or equipment. We have a strong connection with our Kansas swine producers. We have individual producers that have donated. We have producer groups that have donated, the Kansas Soybean Commission, Kansas Pork Association, as well as a plethora of former students that feel very strongly about the future of training of students and recruitment of high-quality students to be part of the swine program. And again, while we have one of the most active swine programs of any land-grant across the United States, we have one of the largest swine production classes that Dr. Goodman teaches. We have a very robust undergraduate research program where there's continually studies being conducted with not only our graduate students, but also with undergraduates to get them exposure and experience, not only in swine, but just in research in general, to maybe find a niche for a potential career down the line.
And since you bring up that angle, as it's that time of year when young folks are leaving high school or community college looking for career opportunities, in the swine industry, there are aplenty, and where might they go to find out what K-State has to offer, as this university is at the forefront of hog production, teaching, and research?
Yes. On our extension swine website, ksuswine.org, we have a lot of producer information. I think really what there is, also with our department in the College of Ag, certainly has information for students in enrolling and career interests. On the swine side, there is so many jobs. That's why I went into swine production. I came to K-State myself for graduate degrees and knew that there was a lot of opportunities. Our swine interested students, both undergrad and graduate, have multiple interviews at multiple places and oftentimes have their choice of where they want to go. The swine industry, not only in Kansas but across the U.S., is very robust and it's growing. A lot of opportunities, not only on swine farms, but in the business side with our suppliers of equipment and feed and health products. So much technical service goes into helping these producers, and those jobs are just plentiful. And so, again, there's a lot of opportunities. We have a number of undergraduates that help us in our swine program so they get experience. And ultimately, the amount of internships that are out there in the swine industry is very plentiful. We place students all over the country for summer internships and great work experiences that not only are good experience-wise, but good financially for them as well during the summertime. And then that allows them to have a leg up on competitors in other states that maybe don't have as much emphasis on that, for them to get employed and have really rewarding jobs in our swine area. So again, there's just many different opportunities, and we'd be more than happy to talk with any students and parents about what those opportunities are in the future.
To learn more about all of that, start by going to ksuswine.org. Once more, exciting times for the swine research team here at Kansas State University with the unveiling of the brand spanking new Kansas State University Farrowing House on the swine farm location. And Joel, thanks once again for letting us know what's happening here.
Thank you, Eric, for letting us highlight this today.
K-State Research and Extension Livestock Specialist Joel DeRouchey. And you're listening to Agriculture Today.
Have you ever thought about where your food comes from? If you're thinking the grocery store, think again. Facts show that the American farmer feeds more than 129 people.
They are continually increasing and improving their operations. A wide variety of crops and livestock are grown in Kansas as well as the United States, providing food to your dinner plate. Next time you see a farmer or rancher, thank them. For more information, contact K-State Research and Extension.
Broadcasting from the campus of Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today, and glad to have you back. Eric Atkinson with you. A quick look ahead now to a webinar series that will start this coming Wednesday, the 12th of May, and it's going to cover topics which are pertinent and of interest to virtually any agricultural producer out there and allied interests. This will be a series covering Kansas farmland values and farm incomes. Filling us in now from the Agricultural Economics Department at K-State, agricultural economist Rich Llewlyn. He is coordinating this webinar. Rich, tell us more about the intent of this particular series.
Well, it's something we've done in the past, and last year we actually increased what we were doing. But first of all, looking at land values in Kansas in 2020. And so we had a land values book that was put together by Robin Reed recently using 2020 land sales in Kansas. And so she's going to discuss that. She has data down to the county level as well as regional and state numbers on that. And it shows that land values actually went up a bit in 2020. And so she'll be able to discuss what happened with that and what's going on regionally in different parts of the state there. The next one then on the 19th of May is Alan Featherstone looking at how property for ag land is valued in Kansas for tax purposes, because that's a rather complicated procedure. It's kind of hard to understand why in the past few years taxes have been going up while land values had been going down or softening some. And so he'll discuss the process on that. It uses an 8-year average of an 8-year average, which is pretty messy, but he gives pretty good understanding for that. The last one then, we'll look at farm income for 2020 from the Kansas Farm Management Association farms. There's about 2,000 farms in Kansas that are members of that association. And so it will look regionally as well as statewide at what farm income did during the year. And then we'll also have Greg Eimendahl looking at projecting what farm income will be for 2021 as well as into 2022 a bit. So that's what's going on that last time.
As listeners can tell, these are happening each of the next 3 Wednesdays around the state. This is roughly a noon-hour program, Rich, that producers can take this in?
Right. We'll start at 12:30 and go till about 1:30 each day. It may go a little longer if there's questions. There will be an opportunity for folks to interact with the speakers and find out specific things they'd like to know about it. But, yeah, we'll plan on about an hour on Wednesdays. The next 3 weeks.
But you did mention a key component of these webinars, and that is there will be full opportunity for questions and answers. And given the topics at hand, these discussions ought to generate quite a bit of dialogue.
They should, actually. All 3 of them. And so there will be an opportunity for questions and discussion to go on after the presentations in each situation there. So, we look forward to people being on. We'll also have it recorded if somebody can't attend it at that time.
And one can watch that recording, pick up on the information on agmanager.info. It's a free program, though. Anybody who'd like to take it in can do so free of charge.
Yes, we'd certainly love to have them, and they do need to register for it so that we know how many are on, and they'll get a link for it then. But they can find out that link for registration on the agmanager.info website.
If you go to agmanager.info, look to the upper right-hand part of that page. There is a link which lists all of the information that will be covered at each of these 3 sessions, as well as the means of registering. Best of luck with this, starting this coming Wednesday. Rich, thanks for briefly filling us in on it today.
And thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Agricultural economist, K-State, that's Rich Llewlyn. Once more, the Department of Agricultural Economics out of the university hosting a series of 3 webinars starting this coming Wednesday, May the 12th, covering Kansas land values, May the 19th on property valuation of agricultural land in Kansas, and May the 26th, the update on 2020 net farm income results from the Kansas Farm Management Association. Be part of these webinars. Go to agmanager.info and enroll. Now, this week's Kansas Wheat Scoop. Here's Marcia Boswell.
Last week's rainfall brought much-needed moisture to some Kansas wheat fields, but left other producers in the far western part of the state saying, "Rain, rain, come again." As the Kansas wheat crop continues to mature and flag leaves start to emerge, Timely moisture is once again the most critical need to bring this year's crop to harvest. According to Dighton wheat farmer Ron Supis, we are a week of 100-degree temperatures away from a disaster, or with a few timely rains, we could have an almost normal yield. Supis reported his wheat crop developed a pretty good stand last fall, despite limited moisture. However, that subsoil moisture has now been depleted. The front last week provided limited relief in his area. For the week ending May 2nd, the USDA's National Agricultural Statistics Service reported 27% of topsoil and subsoil moisture supplies to be very short to short and 73% adequate to surplus. In the same report, NASS stated jointing for the winter wheat crop is ahead of last year at 83%. 12% of winter wheat has now headed behind the 5-year average of 27%. Overall, NASS also reported winter wheat condition across the state at 14% very poor to poor, 31% fair, and 55% good to excellent. Planting date and catching scattered moisture have influenced the condition of individual fields this year, even within counties. Jason Oakes, a farmer from Syracuse, reported wheat in his area is highly variable, with some fields zeroed out from insurance and others looking very good. Last week's rains skipped over his part of the state, with only a few isolated places receiving 30 to 40 hundredths. More rainfall will be needed to keep his best fields above average. He said, "We caught a nice rain at planting time, but it didn't last long, and some of the late planted wheat didn't get a good start. We caught a nice rain a month or so ago. This made it possible to have a crop." The Wheat Quality Council will be assessing both winter wheat conditions and disease pressure across the state during the annual Hard Winter Wheat Tour, May 17th through the 20th. The tour will once again take place in person this year, giving participants a first-hand look at this year's wheat crop as scouts examine individual fields from Manhattan to the Colorado border and back again. In addition to yield, wheat tour attendees will be assessing disease pressure. While both Supis and Oakes reported drought conditions have limited pressure in their areas, K-State Agronomy is encouraging farmers that did receive moisture last week to monitor the crop for wheat streak mosaic virus. Additionally, as the crop moves into the flagleaf stage, K-State Agronomy is encouraging farmers to assess whether a fungicide application will be needed for stripe rust, with scouts reporting more incidents across the state. You can learn more about this guidance at our website, kswheat.com. For Kansas Wheat, I'm Marcia Boswell.
Many thanks, Marcia, and we'll be back in a moment. This is Agriculture Today.
With the shortage of primary care physicians, especially in rural areas, health education and disease prevention are vital. K-State research and extension programs address quality of life, personal development, and health behaviors across all life stages of all social-economic groups. To learn more about health education, one of K-State Research and Extension's 5 grand challenges, visit www.ksre.ksu.edu.
We're back now on Agriculture Today, and now for you, the very latest out of the Weather Data Library here at K-State. It's our occasion to talk once more with Mary Knapp, climatologist with K-State Research and Extension. In a few moments, Mary, we're going to talk about the new normals in weather trends in Kansas and elsewhere. We'll explain shortly here, but you've the wrap-up on the month of April. How does it read?
Well, one thing that might surprise people is that it was a fairly dry month. Statewide, we averaged only 55% of normal. The West was, not surprisingly, on the low end of the stick. Southwest Kansas only averaged 29 hundredths of an inch, which is 18% of normal. The East Central was the wet spot. They averaged 3.08 inches, which is 86% of normal. May has started out on a little bit more even trend. We look at the weekly update, because we do that drought update on a weekly basis. A little bit more moisture for this last of April, first 4 days of May. Southwest averaged 0.6 of an inch, which is 128% of normal for the week. Eastern areas of the state, not so much, and particularly troublesome is the South Central. South Central averaged only 24 hundredths of an inch. That's about a third of what they would typically see during the week. That's an area where the winter wheat is well advanced, and it's in a critical time period for the moisture. We really hope that this weekend event will produce in that area.
Before we dive into that forecast, though, tell us about this new information that came out this week, and it established, if you will, new norms as far as temperature and precipitation going back to a reference point. Explain, if you would.
Well, when we talk about normals in the meteorological or climatological world, we're generally referencing a 30-year average that's updated every 10 years. For the last decade, we have been using the 1981 to the 2010 timeframe as our reference point. On Tuesday, the Centers for Environmental Information, the National Centers for Environmental Information, released their updated version of the normals, and these now cover the 1991 through 2020 timeframe. They haven't been integrated into all products yet, but they will become the new benchmark, if you will, that is the source of comparison. When you hear whether today's weather is warmer or colder than normal, that's the reference point that they're going to be looking at.
That in place, then, what does that suggest about, well, temperature trends? Well, there was some discussion out there that it was showing that we are seeing warming, if you will.
Right. They made quite a bit of national news about it being the warmest normals period. There's quite a bit of depiction of that. But we should note that it isn't even across the country or even across the state. So I went in and pulled the 81 to 2010 and the 91 to 2020 normals to see what kind of changes we might be seeing in parts of Kansas. And we'll be working more at that as the month goes on. But looking at, for example, Manhattan, if we look on an annual basis, there was no change. But it's not just the annual that is of interest. We want to know how the seasons might be changing. In contrast, if we look at Tribune out in western Kansas, they were about 0.3 of a degree cooler than their 81 through 2010 normals. Say we hit down to Garden City. Garden City was a little bit more on the warm side. They were almost 0.7 of a degree warmer on an annual basis. But temperature's not everything. Mm-hmm. We're also wondering about the precipitation. For that, most of the state was wetter than the 81 through 2010 normal. So, summing it up, what we're looking at is because the benchmarks have changed, some things will be easier or harder to attain. Since the rainfall is generally higher than it was in the previous line, looking again at the 81 through 2010, it will be easier to fall short of that benchmark because we've got a higher threshold to approach. When you look at the temperatures, not a whole lot of change, but slightly warmer. That means it will be easier to end up with a period that's cooler than those normals because, again, you've got a higher mark that you're trying to reach in order to be at normal. So that's what producers may want to watch as they're going into the new seasons and see, well, how does this year compare to the previous?
It's intriguing data. And once more, it may run against the grain of preconceived notions about our weather trends in Kansas and elsewhere, for that matter. Looking forward to you working that into your regular weather data library products that producers can use, Mary. To the forecast now, this weekend, moisture is to drift in starting even later today in some parts of Kansas. What's the story?
Well, some places have already started seeing some moisture. Not a heavy amount yet, but it is creeping into that south central region where we would definitely like to see some. The quantitative precip forecast calls for varying amounts, mostly concentrated in the northern to central part of the state, where they may see 1 inch to 1.5 inches in the week from today through next Friday. For the South Central, not nearly so encouraging. The quantitative precip forecast calls for basically less than a half an inch in that region. We'll see how it actually materializes. There are chances of moisture through most of the weekend into midweek next week, but the confidence in that isn't super high, and it's very likely to be very isolated storms, a couple of places that may get heavy amounts and not very far away, not much more than a sprinkle. There is some slight chance for some severe weather. Most of that looks like it's going to be in the form of hail. We're hoping that we'll actually get the moisture without the hail, but we'll have to see how those storms develop.
Yeah, so stay alert there. And Mary, thanks as always. Have a good weekend.
Thanks, Eric.
Our weekly visit with climatologist Mary Knapp of K-State Research and Extension. And that is our time for today and the week. We'll be back here on Monday and hope you will be as well. Until then, enjoy your weekend. Eric Atkinson for Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network.